everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by SpeedStream. I'm Jim Cardle. Congressman Kevin Brady is a former state legislator here in Austin, but now as congressman from Congressional District 8 outside of Houston. He serves as both chairman of the powerful Joint Economic Committee in Congress and the House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee Subcommittee on Health. Brady says of the current economic recovery, it's like a flat can of soda. And as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, believes that the Obama administration's IRS is the most corrupt and deceitful in our nation's history. Congressman Kevin Brady from Congressional District 8 joins us today, and we're pleased to be able to visit with him as chairman of the Joint Economic Committee. Congressman Brady, thanks for joining us.
Jim, thanks for having me.
You have a number of distinguished titles I mentioned in the introduction and are in town, so we want to be respectful of your time and just jump in if we can. Ask you particularly, starting off about the economy, you are chairman of the Joint Economic Committee. House and Senate, rotates back and forth between the House and Senate. But give us, if you would, there was a jobs report the other day. We ran an article about a year ago where you were quoted as saying that the jobs report in the economy is like a flat can of soda. Tell us, if you can, an update. What are you hearing about the economy? What are you in Congress looking at for the Joint Economic Committee?
Well, unfortunately, Texas is doing great, the economy. The rest of the country, not so good. We've been, here it is, 5 years after the recovery began. No question, recession was very tough. But we are way behind where we ought to be. This is the most disappointing recovery in half a century. We're missing where we ought to be right now. We're missing out of our economy an economy the size of Mexico or Australia. We're missing about 6 million jobs. It should be back by now, and that's enough to put everyone looking for work in 44 states back into a job. And so, you know, one of the big questions is, do we stay the course on this very slow recovery, or in Washington, do we change the direction so we can get some people back to work?
If we can drill down into that, I know you've been active on legislation, the American Jobs Act, Energy for America Act. I believe it's in the 40s or 50s, the number of bills economic bills you and the House have sent to the Senate. Talk about some of those initiatives if you can, if there's any possibility.
Absolutely. Well, there's obviously fixing this broken tax code, becoming so much more competitive as a country is really key long-term for economic growth. But immediately, you know, the energy revolution, which is just, thank goodness for energy. You know, they're hiring from the very unskilled to the very high skilled, paying salaries you can raise a family on. Very important to frankly every ethnic group. Energy is really the lifesaver in our economies. And so getting red tape out of the way, giving them more access, you know, to public lands as well as private lands, unleashing some of the Gulf waters that are really ripe for development. And then, of course, we've got to build the pipelines to get all this new American energy to the refineries and back out to the markets. And that's an area where by some estimates, we will need 3 Keystone XL pipelines built every year for the next 2 decades just to make this energy revolution real for families and businesses. So, big job creator as an industry, second largest writer of tax revenue. So energy industry is helping us get back to a balanced budget. We just need to do more, I think, to get out of their way.
You are a former state legislator here back in the early 90s before going to Congress.
Yes, sir.
You were always named as one of the champions of small business. You've continued that in the House. Up in Congress, how about the small business angle? What are you seeing, particularly being from Houston, the energy capital of the world? What's the state of the small businessman, or are you pushing any initiatives in Congress? Is there any hope for the small businessman?
Yes, there is, but they've really, I think, paid the biggest price in this slow recovery. Many of them just aren't back to where they want to be. Those who service the energy industry, trade, and healthcare, you know, those are growing for Texas. But what our small businesses tell us is that all the red tape coming out of Washington, whether it's Dodd-Frank that makes it tougher for local banks to lend to them, whether it's the Affordable Care Act and all the mandates and costs there, small businesses are really pulling their punches in job hiring when they'd rather be going forward. And as a result, The missing ingredient out of the economy, it isn't consumer spending, that's bounced back. It isn't government spending, that bounced back quickly. It's business investment. It's when they buy buildings and equipment and software, reinvest back in their company. That's the one thing that's really missing out of this recovery.
If I can, appreciate your comments there. Change subjects real quick. Again, folks, I want to thank you for tuning in to this edition of Texas Insider TV. We're visiting with Kevin Brady out of Congressional District 8 outside of Houston. Chairman, you have been involved in another issue that's gotten quite a bit of attention this year, and that is the IRS scandal and the IRS investigation into certain nonprofit groups. And we quoted you. You've said this is the most deceitful IRS in the history of the nation. Talk about the status there. Lois Lerner, I know, has been voted in contempt. You've had Mr. Koshigan, the commissioner of the IRS, in front of your committee a number of times. Give us an update on the IRS investigation.
You know, we've got some work to do. We're a year into the investigation. We've sorted through, I think, some 600,000 pages of documents. We forwarded to the Attorney General now 4 direct referrals of prosecution, specifically on Lois Lerner, for violation of taxpayer and civil rights, leaking private taxpayer information, targeting these conservatives against the law. We've also passed out of the House a resolution asking for a special prosecutor. Unfortunately, the Attorney General has rebuffed us on all of that. The White House, unfortunately, has stonewalled a lot of the data and information. But what we now know is they clearly broke the law. They clearly targeted not just organizations, but their donors. And the reason we pursue this, one, we want to get to the truth, so everyone in the public knows it. Secondly, hold those accountable who broke the laws. But thirdly, maybe most importantly, stop this from ever happening again. The truth is, IRS has the power to destroy families and businesses and lives. No president of either party should have the ability to use the IRS to punish and silence the voices of people who disagree with them. And so there's really a bigger issue, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, wherever you're at, you don't want the government to have that power.
You're talking about the bigger issue. A lot of citizens, by and large, think of tax day and the IRS. And let me ask you that specific question. Can the IRS, and if they can, how, is there any hope, in your opinion, of the IRS gaining the confidence of you congressmen back and the American people?
You know, it's going to be a tough haul because the American public doesn't believe that they're acting fairly. They do believe they're targeting citizens. They don't think they're coming clean about their role, and they don't believe they lost emails and all that. And so I continue to push every IRS commissioner of the month. Look, open it up to regain the people's trust. Just tell us what happened. Fix it. You know, show us that in fact you can be neutral again in how you collect our taxes. But this is my view, the most corrupt and deceitful IRS in history. They've got good people. We know locally. They work to resolve tax disputes, no question. But its leadership is just wrong for America.
You, I mentioned as Joint Economic Committee chairman, also serve, a lot of folks won't know, but you need to be given credit for this. Your subcommittee in the Ways and Means Committee is the Health Committee. Big issue. ObamaCare comes and goes as a publicly debated issue, but talk about your chairmanship of the Ways and Means Health Subcommittee. What are you working on? Is there Obamacare issues? Doctors probably have a number of questions. What are you looking at for that subcommittee?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Last year we stepped over from leading trade for many years to leading healthcare. One, for the rollout of the Affordable Care Act, but also we've got a crisis that's grown over the years, and it is that fewer and fewer doctors can afford to see our Medicare patients. So as we have an aging population, you have fewer doctors in Texas. Less than half of family physicians can afford to see new seniors, which is a bad trend.
And we're gaining 1,000 people a day into the state of Texas. It's not like we can project the population growth is going to be there.
It is going to be there. We need to have, and if there's any group that needs to see a doctor they know and who knows them, it's the seniors. And so I work with both parties in both the House and Senate together to come up with a solution to how we reimburse our doctors, one that was endorsed by 600 physician groups. It really changes the way we reimburse doctors in a way that they spend more time practicing, healthcare with patients, less time worrying about our paperwork and our mandates, and over the long run is going to help keep seniors healthier longer. We still got some work to do. We have to figure out a way to pay for it, but we achieved something that hasn't been done in 15 years. Because both parties, Jim, by the way, and both the House and Senate work together to find the right solution. It can be done in Washington, but my belief is we can't save Medicare for the long haul until we first solved how we reimburse our local doctors.
Big task there, and appreciate your work. One final question for Congressman Kevin Brady, Chairman of the Joint Economic Committee and Chairman of the Health Subcommittee in the Ways and Means Committee. It's been in the news a little bit lately, a leak of Target's data, a leak of Home Depot's data, a leak of healthcare.gov's data. Give us your thoughts on that before we let you get down the road.
Yeah, this is very frustrating. We know what happens in the private sector, but it's particularly frightening in the public sector in the sense that when you go to healthcare.gov or provide taxpayer information to IRS, you want to make sure it's not unsecure, can't be hacked. And here we are heading into the second year of the Affordable Care Act. The government's asking people to go back to the website to re-sign again, but the public confidence in that has continued to deteriorate. And so we're continuing to push the government. If they're going to push people into this plan, you've got to put together the security on that site. There is a new administrator. We just held a hearing with him from the private sector. He's been in place 2 months. We're hopeful. He's pledged to be open, honest, tell us where the problems are and fix them. And so we're hopeful he does exactly that.
And real quickly, you mentioned something that made me think of a final question, and that has to do with the second year of enrollment for people who have enrolled in the program. A lot of folks are said to have cost increases coming. True, accurate? What's your outlook?
It is. The most will see some tax or some cost increase on the monthly costs. Almost all have seen major increases in their deductibles. And their worry is that now they're finding out they can't see their local doctor or the hospital they go to. So there's real problems heading into year 2 as well. In some states, I think you'll see a small decrease in a few of those states. I think the bulk of them will be increases because the mandates haven't yet stopped kicking in. You're going to see even more of those costly mandates, and that always lands on the consumer. And so, again, even though it's subsidized very heavily, and even though Medicaid is covering most of the people within the Affordable Care Act, those who are getting the plans off the exchanges probably should plan for either higher monthly premiums or higher deductibles.
Congressman Kevin Brady, we appreciate you coming in. We hope you'll come back in January and let us know about the status of those enrollments.
I'd like that, Jim. Thanks again for having me.
Folks, we want to thank you again for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. We're honored today to have Congressman Kevin Brady from Congressional District 8 outside of Houston, and the chairman of the Joint Economic Committee, as well as the chairman of the Health Subcommittee in the House Ways and Means Committee. Remember, folks, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.